Hi, I'm Tracy Bevington. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and the owner and founder of Pacific Marriage and Family Therapy Network, which is a group psychotherapy practice, and we've got offices in Manhattan Beach, Santa Monica, and Sherman Oaks. For today's Facebook Live segment, I'm talking about part two of Help! I'm Parenting a Teenager. Part two is about when communicating turns into lecturing, or what's the difference, or how do you communicate without lecturing? Before we get started, I'd like to remind you all that if you have any comments or questions at all, please feel free to put them in the comments section. I'm happy to try and answer them within this segment, or I will definitely get back to you as soon as I can with a response. If you are joining us for the first time, if you wouldn't mind letting us know that you're joining us for the first time and where you're joining us from, that would be great. If you are interested in joining our newsletter or being in contact with our offices, you'll see a link at the top of the page. Okay. Oh, I almost forgot. If you are watching, just please take some time to check your volume or make sure that your volume is turned up so that you can hear us or hear me properly. Alrighty, so when I think about communicating with a teenager, the first thing I do is I think about, oh, what was it like when I was a teenager and my parents were talking to me? Can you remember, like, what was that like for you? I think that a lot of us have an experience, a similar experience. Um, and not to say that our parents were bad or they didn't know what they were doing or anything like that. It's just that they didn't know. They learned from their parents and their parents learned from their parents. And so there's a particular style of parenting that gets passed down through the generations. But I remember talking to my parents when I was a teenager. It didn't feel so much like talking as it felt like being talked to. I got a lot of advice, and some of it was really good, and some of it I didn't really feel like it related, or I wasn't able to take it in. But the thing that really struck me or strikes me now that I look back on it was that when I was talking with my parents, I didn't really have I wasn't engaged. I wasn't part of the conversation. I just listened a lot and tried to take as much as I could in. So that's one way to do it. Now, if many of you have tried that with your kids now, how many of you feel like that is most effective? Right. Not many. These days, kids are a lot more aware of what their kind of like child rights are and about what's reportable and what's not. And they really know how to kind of keep us from really talking to them or like telling them what to do or yelling or like spanking or any of those things, right? It's just not allowed now, where back in the day it was all right to do. It wasn't as big of a deal. So when we think about communicating or talking with our teenager, it's important because these are a different generation of kids to think about how to communicate with them. Communication is a two-way street. To communicate means to give and receive, and give and receive. It's an exchange. To communicate is an exchange. So when we're talking to our teenage kids and we're not giving them an opportunity to talk, is that really a conversation? I'd have to say if we asked any of your kids out there, they'd probably wholeheartedly say, no, I don't get to talk with my parents. I hear people, lots of teenage clients say, my parents talk at me. They tell me what to do. They tell me what I'm doing wrong, but they don't really feel like they're having conversation or that they're actually talking. So consider an example of, I don't know, let's say you find weed, you find marijuana in your kid's room or in their backpack. Most parents are going to kind of freak out, like, what? Oh my God, no. Get angry, and possibly, let's look at scenario one. Grab whatever it is. As soon as you see your kid, you're going to like sit them down and say, what is this? You know this is not okay. So you know it's not okay. I'm really upset with you. I'm going to take away your phone forever. You're grounded for 30 days. Oh, and by the way, you never do your homework. You come home late and your grades stink. So when we get into that angry place where we're triggered, we start throwing like the kitchen sink at our kids. And that's not a conversation. That's just your kid taking on a barrage of things. And a lot of those things are things that they're not doing well, things that they're doing wrong. So oftentimes I hear from teenage kids, clients, that all they're ever told is that they're doing things wrong and how to do it right. But that way of doing it right doesn't resonate with them. So let's go to like a second scenario. So you find weed in your kid's room or in their backpack. And you find it and you're feeling really upset. Like, oh my God, I can't believe this. What the hell? And you take it and you take a deep breath. You call your partner, spouse, therapist, friend. You try to get some support to blow off the steam. Oh my gosh, you won't believe what I found. This is horrible. No, 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 no. My kid's not that kind of kid. I can't believe this. So you get out all the steam and then you come up with a plan. Okay, I think I'm going to sit down after dinner and me and my spouse or partner, we're on the same page. We've got a plan. We're going to talk about things and figure out what's going on. How many of you have resonate more with scenario two? Like, oh my gosh, that's totally what I do. Or do you resonate more with scenario one? I'd say most of us resonate with scenario one, where it's kind of an explosion and it's a lot of lecturing, it's a lot of talking to, it's a lot of pointing out all the terrible things that our kids are doing all at one time because we're triggered. So the question then becomes, okay, well, if we want scenario two to be our way, like, how do you do that? Because it's not as simple to just be like, oh, wow, I think we have something we need to talk about, right? Because that's not realistic either. I'm not saying you need to Pollyanna it. What I'm saying is that in order to get to something like scenario two, it's important to wait. Wait until you and your nervous system, your brain, is ready to think and think clearly. Because when we get activated, our brain goes to this limbic system, which is the old part of our brain. The limbic system is very reactive. All it's doing is getting a feeling, it's getting triggered, and it goes through old memory, and it's like, oh my God, I know this. And oftentimes that thing that it pulls out is not relevant at all, or it's just faulty information because it's reactive. This is the part of the brain where when you're going to die, this is really great because it's going to save you. It's going to pull out everything possible to make sure that you're safe and that everything's okay. The thing is, that part of our brain can't really tell the difference between being activated because we're going to die or being activated because we found weed in our kid's bedroom. So we have to be able to calm our nervous system and get our brain to come up here to the prefrontal cortex. This is where we're reasonable and rational, but you can't get to here if you're stuck in the limbic system. So wait, blow off some steam with a friend, a spouse, a partner, your therapist, anybody you can talk to, or journal about it, whatever you do to kind of blow off the steam to get your brain into the right space. Once you are more calm, you can also practice grounding yourself. This is part of self-care, where you breathe because you want to get oxygen into your bloodstream. So you get oxygen into your bloodstream, that's going to tell your brain that everything's okay and things settle down. So breathe, and you're going to do the breathing in for 3 seconds, hold, breathe out for 5. We talked about this in a previous segment. If you have questions about it, please leave your questions and I'll be happy to go over it again. But you want to ground yourself, you want to breathe, and you want to get your nervous system to activate right here, prefrontal cortex. When you can get your brain there, you're going to think and you're not going to be reactive. That's the 2 best things you can have when you want to have a conversation, is to be able to think and not be reactive. So once you're calm, once you've grounded yourself, you want to think about what's really important here. You may be really upset that you found weed, but is that really the point? Is that what's important? Is that what you want to communicate to your teenager? That you're doing weed, oh my gosh. Or is it something more like that they were keeping a secret from you? Or that they may have even been lying if you'd been asking, hey, are you and your friends smoking weed? And they're like, oh, no, we never did that. Those are way bigger things to discuss than why there is weed in their backpack. You want to develop conversation around things that are meaningful, around things that are important. So it may feel like you want to know, why is this weed in here? What's going on? All these different things. The bigger issue is, why didn't they tell you? How come they felt like they had to hide this from you? And now that you've found it, are they going to talk to you about it, or are they going to continue to lie and make up stories about how they're holding on to it for a friend? I've heard that one many times before. Not from my kids, thank goodness, but from other clients and parents. So think about what's important, and then talk about those things that are important. What's not important, just leave it alone for right now. That doesn't mean that you're going to just be okay with, oh, my kid smokes weed or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for this particular conversation, that's not necessarily the topic you want to go after. Then, once you've decided what's important, you have to figure out how to talk to them about it. Now, talking to them is actually really different than talking with them. When you talk with somebody, you're asking a ton of questions because there are all these things you don't know and you don't understand. So if you don't understand what your kid, your teenager is thinking, or why this is happening, or what's coming up, how can you help them with it? You can't. So asking questions is the number one way to have conversation. So ask some very simple questions like, well, how long have you been smoking? Is there any other kind of, marijuana product that you're using? Are you vaping? Are you doing any other kind of drugs? What are your friends doing? How did this start? There are a ton of questions. How does this help you? What is it that kept you from telling us about it? And what can we do to make sure that you can tell us about things, that you don't have to keep secrets from us? This is all like problem solving, right? When you have a problem, you want to solve it. Not when you have a problem, you want to like force it into any kind of resolution that you want it to. This is about actually solving a problem. So once you have the conversation, well, you calm yourself, ground yourself, think about what's important, come up with a plan of action, ask questions, and then involve your teenager. I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but it's super effective. Involve your teenager in coming up with what to do next. Sometimes that means like, well, what kind of consequence is going to come of this? Or how could we, like next time if something like this comes up, what can we do differently on your end, my teenage child, and on my end as a parent? How can we do this differently so that it doesn't end up like this? These are all really, you know, when I talk about it, it's kind of like, oh, it doesn't seem so hard. But everything becomes hard if you're not grounded. If you go into any situation fired up, it's not going to go well. And that goes for like any situation, not just talking to your teenager. So please, you know, if you really want to talk and communicate with your child, consider waiting, calming your system, access your prefrontal cortex, consider what's important, plan, talk and ask questions, or talk with the other person, ask questions, and problem solve together to figure out what kind of consequence is going to come of this and how to avoid it for next time. Again, I know when I list it out like that, even I think, wow, that seems easy, but also hard. It takes a lot of practice, especially if you didn't learn this from your family. So you're not going to get it perfect at the beginning. It's probably going to go a little sideways, but that's okay. As long as you're trying to do something different and trying to communicate in a different way, I know that your teenager will appreciate it, and anyone else that you're having conversation with. So again, I'm Tracy Bevington. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and the president and founder of Pacific Marriage and Family Therapy Network. I want to thank you very much for joining me for this segment of Facebook Live, where we discussed part 2 of Help, I'm Parenting a Teenager, and the difference between communicating and lecturing, or how to get the most out of communicating with your teenager. Every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, we will have another segment of Facebook Live, and next week's topic is going to be parenting or Help, I'm Parenting a Teenager, part 3, and we'll be discussing how to set limits and boundaries, or more about like discipline. So I really look forward to having you join me then. Again, that's Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific, and I hope you have a really great day. Thanks.